Hello everyone. This is the 12th part of the story. Blade God of Blood. Chapter 23 Tea House. Madame Gao was very puzzled by Bert's words. You can't forgive me, but you can take me back to Kunlun? Blood God, what do you mean? You've committed too many crimes, I can't forgive it. Bert said. But I can make a deal with you. You will be the head of the vampire clan, and you will be responsible for teaching the elite vampires how to practice qi. And I promise to take you back to Kunlun in the future, but in the process, I will not relieve you of your control, and you can only stay in a limited place, like a jail. I am willing to accept such punishment, thank you, Blood God. Madame Gao fell to the ground, expressing her gratitude. As long as she can return to Kunlun, she can accept everything. What age is this? You don't need to do this, and I just made a deal with you. Bert waved his hand. He thought of something and asked, Has your soul been taken away by the beast? Madame Gao straightened up, picked up her crutches, and stood up, shaking her head, said, No, I'm careful, I've never been resurrected, and I don't believe in the beast. Good. Bert nodded and said, Madame Gao, I will trouble you in the future. I want to make qi a regular force for the elites of the vampires. Madame Gao said, Teaching is not a problem, but it requires a lot of elixir. That I have more. Bert put his hand into his chest and pulled out a rib that was taller than a human being. Complete ribs? How many elixirs are down there? Madame Gao with her eyes wide open. They didn't steal so many elixirs from Kunlun back then. This elixir is very durable, such one is enough for the vampires to use for decades. More than you can imagine! Bert put the dragon rib on the ground, thought for a while, took out his phone, and called Mercury. Change the cafe into a tea house, drink tea on the first floor, and practice martial arts on the second. Make a news sign and call it Dragon Subduing Tea House. Putting down the phone, Bert said to Madame Gao, From now on, you will stay in the tea house, and you are not allowed to leave without my order. Madame Gao said respectfully, Yes, Blood God. Seismologists said that this earthquake in Manhattan is not a precursor to a major earthquake. Please, citizens, don't worry. Listening to the news on the TV, Natasha secretly complained. She was not worried at first, but after hearing this, she started to worry. At this moment, 7 or 8 hours have passed since the earthquake, and the chaos caused by the earthquake has subsided. After all, this is Manhattan and there are lots of police forces. At this time, a secret phone in Natasha's arms suddenly vibrated. She looked around vigilantly and confirmed that there was no problem, and then took out the phone to answer. Natasha, we have found the source of the earthquake. It's in Hell's Kitchen. Nick Fury's voice came out. The long-term rental apartment that Bert bought is the area of the epicenter. Do you suspect that the earthquake was caused by the Blood God? Natasha said in amazement. Director, as far as I know, he has no such ability and will not do such a thing. There's something wrong with that apartment, otherwise the vampires and the Hand will never fight for it. Director Fury said, Natasha, I am now officially changing your mission from the original short-term observation mission to a long-term latent mission. Long-term lurking? Director, isn't this a waste of time? Natasha asked. She is a top agent, the first of the female field agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Not a waste. In addition to finding out whether the earthquake is related to the Blood God, you have to find out another thing. Chief Fury said. Find out everything about the Ancient One. I see. Natasha understood, and she smiled. Director Fury, use the honorific title, that is the Guardian of the Earth. Director Fury said coldly. We S.H.I.E.L.D. are the guardians of the Earth. Anyone with a potential threat to the planet must be monitored. To be honest, the existence of Ancient One made Director Fury quite restless, because Ancient One was too strong, and more importantly, he had no understanding of Ancient One at all. What if one day Ancient One can't think about it, and suddenly wants to destroy the world? S.H.I.E.L.D. is such an organization with persecutory paranoia. Natasha naturally knew the character of Director Fury. She said, It is not so easy to get the information of Master Ancient One. The blood god respects her very much, and respects her sincerely, although he is a vampire. I don't care how you complete the task, I just need you to complete the task. Director Fury left a sentence and hung up the phone directly. Natasha rolled her eyes. Believe it or not, this lady can change jobs on the spot. The salary here is 3 times higher than S.H.I.E.L.D. Natasha put down the phone, stood in front of the mirror, and looked at herself obsessively. Is there any woman more beautiful than herself? It looks like I'm going to give Bert a little sweetness. There is no man I can't handle in the world because I am so beautiful. More than half a month has passed in the blink of an eye. The previous earthquake in Manhattan was quickly replaced by the disappearance of Tony Stark. Now everyone cares about whether Tony Stark is dead and who inherits his legacy. No one talks about that little earthquake again. Bert, who had been shorting Stark Industries early in the morning, made a lot of money. In addition to the legacy of the Hand, his assets were more than when he first took over the vampire clan. He couldn't help but sigh. What? When will the money run out? Everyone who heard this sentence wanted to give Bert a middle finger. Blade really did, and then asked Bert to give all the vampire police an extra month's salary. During this time, the vampire police station was too busy. Bert waved his hand and directly approved the 2-month bonus. Anyway, it was not bad, and he even gave out the high-tech mask developed by Tony Stark as a benefit. The vampire police station cheered, and worked harder to eliminate the traitors. Everything is developing in a good direction. In the backyard of the tea house transformed from the original coffee shop, Bert, who was wearing a training suit, exhaled and slammed his red fist on a large stone 10 inches thick. With a bang, the stone shattered. It turned into several pieces and smashed to the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. In this punch, Bert only used 20% of the power of the Iron Fist, not the power of the Blood God himself. Blood God, you are cultivating very quickly, and the chi you have now is comparable to that of a third-time fuser. Madame Gao sighed next to her. The speed of the Blood God fusing the elixir was too fast, not only because he had a dragon soul, but also because of the Blood God's ability. Bone and blood are a part of the body. The elixir that takes others years to completely fuse, Blood God can fuse within a month. Bert himself was not very satisfied. He said, "There is still a problem with the control. The force I just exerted is too great. I just want to break the stone, and I don't want it to fly around." Your thinking is right. The West pursues the greater the power, the better. In the East, we pay attention to control. A little controllable power is more important than a very uncontrollable power. Madame Gao smiled and said, "But it's not urgent. You can study every day slowly. No matter how talented you are, Blood God, you still have to slowly grind this kung fu. Further polish your control." Bert said, "Then grind it slowly. When I hit the egg with an iron fist and the egg doesn't break, then it's done." Which martial arts novel is this from? Madame Gao was speechless. She said, "Blood God, in addition to control, you must continue to hone your chi, and strive to reach the realm of reading chi. This is the basic skill." Bert nodded and said, "Basic skills must be practiced naturally, and only with a solid foundation can I reach a higher realm." Madame Gao nodded in approval. At this moment, Bert thought of one thing and asked, "By the way, can Mercury cultivate chi?" "No, her physical fitness is enough, but her spirit is still a lot worse." Madame Gao said, "I have taught her to meditate, and I have taught her how to use the spirit to sense the energy, chi. As long as she calms down and cultivates for a month, she can initially meet the requirements. The key is meditation. It's hard for Westerners to understand our visualization and meditation." Bert shook his head, and Madame Gao smiled. "Mercury and Snowman are fine, they can more or less understand the thoughts of the East, but Frank can't do it, let alone meditate. He can't sit still quietly for 5 minutes. With Frank's temper, it's no wonder he can't sit down." Bert laughed. He said, "Madame Gao, thank you for your hard work. After we teach Mercury and Snowman, we will spread the elixir to the elites of the vampire clan. At that time, the elites of the vampire clan can improve their strength without sucking the blood of living people. Madame Gao said humbly. This is my duty. At this time, the intercom on the side rang. Blood God, Director Fury of S.H.I.E.L.D. is coming. Nick Fury came over in person? It seems that there is a big event. Let him wait for me in the living room, Bert said, and then he cleaned himself and went to the meeting room to see Director Fury. Bert and Director Fury shook hands and said, Director Fury, a rare visitor. It's really rare. I've seen many clubs that ask for membership cards, but this is the first time I've seen a tea house that asks for membership cards. Director Fury said, Aren't you afraid of the closure of the tea house? It can't go out of business. I have already bought the place, so no need for rent. Bert smiled. He asked Director Fury to sit down and asked, Director Fury, you are here. What do you want? Director Fury went straight to the point. I want you to save Tony Stark. He is very important to the safety of the world. Bert said, I can save him, but I don't want to go. I'm a vampire and can't face the sun. Director Fury has a look of contempt. How dare you say that you can't face the sun, a guy who plays with beautiful women on the beach every day. Director Fury threw his chips. I heard that you are buying the Rand Group's medical department. I can make it smoother for you. You mean, if I don't promise you to save Tony, we can't buy the Rand Group? Bert asked with a cold face. Director Fury instantly felt that he was being targeted by a giant beast and could die at any time. Director Fury said very calmly, I'm talking about smoother. Your bid is very low, and you are buying the most important medical department of the Rand Group. There are many speculations from the outside world. I can make you completely immune to outside influence. Is that so? Bert took back his momentum. He took a sip of the tea he had just brewed and said, I can help you in saving Tony, but I hope to reach a consensus with you. Director Fury asked. What consensus? Bert said. In the next few months, I will operate the stocks of the Stark Group, and even buy a large amount of the stocks of the Stark Group. You want to buy Stark Group? Director Fury squinted and said loudly, Bert Wong, this is impossible. If you do this, there will only be one result, the kind of war that will never end. No matter how confusing human beings are, vampires can't control their strongest military-industrial group. I know, I didn't intend to do this, I just wanted to take the opportunity to make a lot of money. Bert said, After my plan is successful, I will sell all the stocks in my hands, and I will not keep a single share. Director Fury asked, What's your plan? Acquisition of another big company with a market value of more than 100 billion. Bert didn't hide it, he said. If I want to control this big company, I must prepare at least $50 billion of funds. Although I can get it now, it will affect the operation of the Blood God Group. Therefore, I plan to start to take money from the stock market. Director Fury frowned. A large group worth more than 100 billion? Blood God, this is a bit too much. Bert smiled and said, It's just a bit too much. If we give enough benefits, you will still agree, right? Director Fury said, Blood God, if you do this, it will increase our vigilance. Bert said, I will make up for it afterward. My vampires will never be the enemies of humans. Director Fury looked at Bert expressionlessly, and Bert drank tea leisurely, which let Nick Fury know that whether he agreed or not, the other party would complete his plan. I'm just letting you know, not asking for your consent. After a while, Director Fury said, Acquisition is possible, but it must abide by the law, and cannot use excessive means, such as assassinating the other party's chairman or turning the other party's executives into vampires. Don't worry, I know the rules of the game. Bert smiled, said, Speaking of which, Director Fury, do you want to invest? I can promise you twice the return. Director Fury shook his head directly. I will not use the funds of S.H.I.E.L.D. to gamble. Bert looked at Director Fury with a bit of surprise. How could this old corrupt guy be so righteous and awe-inspiring? Director Fury did not explain, nor did he try to explain that his corruption was not for himself, but to build a base to protect the world, which is different from misappropriating shield funds to gamble. For an old-school guy like Director Fury, the stock market is a gamble. Director Fury said, "This consensus shield can agree, but I want 10% of your profits." "Dream on. 1% is the most. Don't forget, you want me to help to save Tony." Bert categorically refused. This kind of Nick Fury is normal. The previous one was like being taken away. 1% is too little, at least 9%. Nope, 1%. Did you suggest the counteroffer like this? Do you want to get 5%? Keep dreaming. Do you know that each percentage point is calculated in billions? If you want to have it, just 1%. Don't think I don't know. You will take this money into your private fund. You are slandering. Chief Fury snorted and said, 1% is enough, but you must save Tony immediately. Okay, you ask the US military to prepare for my arrival at the Middle East base, and I'll take a private jet over there. Bert said, by the way, help me apply for the next flight. It's very troublesome. Okay. Chief Fury got up and said, be sure to save Tony safely. Bert said insincerely, I'll try. Chapter 24 Mark 1. After sending off Nick Fury, Bert called Frank. Can you fly a helicopter? Yes, then it's easy to handle. I'm going to the Middle East, you pack up and come with me. After hanging up the phone, Bert called Mercury in and instructed, take all our remaining funds to short the stock group. Mercury was puzzled. Blood God, aren't you going to save Tony Stark? Just do it. Bert said, by the way, have you checked the things I asked you about? Check it out. Mercury nodded. Obadiah Stane has 2 sons. If he dies unexpectedly, the shares of Stark Group will be jointly inherited by these 2 sons. Obadiah Stane's 2 sons are trash. They can only eat, drink, and have fun. Obadiah looks down on them very much, and their father-son relationship is quite bad. Set up the bureau to catch them, and let them owe a lot of debt. Bert said, make sure that after Obadiah Stane dies, they will transfer Stane's shares to us. Mercury was stunned. This is a small matter, but blood God, Obadiah Stane will die. Isn't Tony Stark in danger? I'm going. How can he be in danger? Bert smiled, got up, and prepared to rush to the Middle East. Speaking of which, if it wasn't for the embarrassment of his vampire status, he would have been able to buy the Stark Group shares himself. Of course, it would be impossible to make Tony work for me. How can Tony Stark work for others? It's impossible. In a dark cave in the Middle East, Tony Stark, with a scruffy beard and tattered clothes, looked at the arc reactor on his chest and looked a little dazed. He, the dream lover of all the beauties in America, would have such a devastating day? About a month ago, after Tony and the military reached an agreement worth $1 billion for the Jericho missile, he returned to the base in a jeep. On the way, he and several soldiers happily joked and enjoyed their chats. Suddenly, a missile came down and blew the jeep, and what made him even more depressed was that the missile was produced by the Stark Group. When Tony woke up, he found that he had been kidnapped by a group of terrorists. There was a big hole in his chest, and there was an electromagnet powered by the car battery. Even though he doesn't like this, without this electromagnet, which kept the missile shrapnel from reaching his heart and taking his life away. After that, the group of terrorists asked Tony to make Jericho missiles, but Tony was naturally unwilling. As a result, his head was stuffed into the pool of water. Tony, who had never been so miserable before, could only compromise. It's just a temporary compromise. Tony Stark is not a person who will admit defeat. With the help of Dr. Hoenson, who is also a prisoner, Tony used the materials sent by the terrorists to make a small arc reactor, and then used it to replace the electromagnet and battery. Now it's much better than before. This arc reactor is not an ordinary thing. It is a cold nuclear reactor, which was created by Tony's father Howard Stark and Anton Vank. However, their finished product is an oversized reactor, which is of little significance. Stark Industries has spent decades trying to make the arc reactor smaller, But it never worked, and Tony Stark, in a cave like this, did it with a pile of scraps. That's genius, a peerless genius that is enough to influence the whole world. The arc reactor can release 3 billion joules of energy in 1 second. Tony made it not just to replace the electromagnet, he has another big plan. It will be completed in 2 days. At that time, you will know that a genius cannot be underestimated. At this time, he saw the pool beside him vibrating from the corner of his eye. He couldn't help but turn his head to take a look, and then he was stunned. What the hell is this? He saw that the water in the pool formed a line of English words. Tony, I am Bert Wong, who is more attractive and richer than you. Tony couldn't help but rub his eyes, and when he found that the line was still there, he was immediately amazed. What the hell? How did the water suddenly turn into words? And what does it mean to be more attractive and richer than me? Is there such a person in this world? Bert Wong, that nasty, see-through kid? Tony took a peek at the camera and found that he was blocking it. He breathed a sigh of relief. He thought for a while and asked in a very low voice, Cheating kid? The water surface shook, and a line of words reformed. It's you who cheated. You buried a hole in the mask for me, selling the silicone and batteries for an unreasonable price? I only said I'll give you the patent for the mask. Tony was a little proud, and now it is certain that the water surface is really under the control of that kid. In other words, that kid can both see through and control water. Isn't this too unscientific? The water surface changed again. Don't talk nonsense, someone asked me to rescue you. I can bring the army over tomorrow. Rescue me? Tony was stunned. If the other party said to save him a few days ago, he would be ecstatic. The problem is that now his plan is almost completed, and there is no need for others to save him. Tony doesn't want to owe favors, and he doesn't want to be pitiful, waiting for someone to save him like a refugee. No need, I can escape by myself. Tony refused outright. He was an arrogant man in Bert's language. The water surface changed again. Just wait outside and pick me up. After thinking about it, Tony still left some room for himself. The symbols on the water disappeared immediately, and Tony instantly understood what the other party meant. I'm too lazy to care about you. This guy is annoying. Tony gritted his teeth secretly, and Dr. Eason heard the voice and couldn't help but turn his head to ask. Tony, what's wrong? Tony said excitedly. It's nothing, Eason. If there is no accident, we can escape soon. Hope so. Eason nodded, but an accident occurred immediately as these parts they made were not like Jericho missiles at all. The leader of the terrorist group, Raza, saw this and brought his people in for a while to coerce them and gave them a time limit to finish the missiles by tomorrow. Give them what they want, or he will send us to hell. Tony had a hard look on his face, but he can't go begging Bert, so he could only work overtime with Eason to try to get his armor done by tomorrow. That's right, the armor, that is, Iron Man's first armor, Mark I. On a hill near this base, Bert, who was sitting in a gunship, sneered. Is it fun now? That Raza wears the ring of the 10 Rings gang on his hand, which means that the real deal is in this world. Bert narrowed his eyes. In the movie, Mandarin is a British actor named Trevor, who is completely oblivious to the acts the Mandarin has carried out. The Mandarin is Aldrich Killian's creation, but in the comics, Mandarin is real existence. He is also Iron Man's #1 enemy. With 10 powerful rings, he dominates most of the Middle East and the terrorists. Forget it, I probably won't meet Master Mandarin. After saving Tony, go straight back home. I'm not interested in helping Tony deal with his mortal enemy. Bert thought to himself, and Frank, who was driving in front of him, asked, What's the situation? Did you find that billionaire? I found him. He seems to have some plan to get out of trouble and doesn't want me to save him. Bert said that he is the blood god and can control blood, and most of the components of blood are water, so he can also control a little water, but it is not powerful. At most he can make a few words like before. And the reason why he could hear Tony speak was that Tony had his blood in his body. Once he got here, he made contact with blood. He knew everything that happened to Tony during this time. "He's a willful fellow, so what should we do?" Frank asked disdainfully. He didn't like Tony Stark that much, although the Stark Group's stuff was really useful. "Whether he wants us to save it or not, it's none of our business," Bert said. "Contact Colonel Rhodes and ask him to bring someone here. We will start tomorrow and try to go back as soon as possible. I hate this place, it's too hot, and there are no beautiful women. I've served here for 10 years and I still hate it here." Frank laughed. Then, he picked up the phone to contact Colonel Rhodes. Rhodes was very surprised that they found him. Before, he was searching for months but still couldn't find him. Rhodes hurriedly said, "I'll bring people over immediately, don't startle the snakes. When I was killing terrorists on the front line, you were still nailing in logistics." Frank hung up the phone with a look of disdain. Rhodes was speechless, but he couldn't provoke Frank, the super soldier king. He could only put down the phone, go out and organize a rescue team, and try to get there as soon as possible. The next day, Tony Stark, who had stayed up all night, finally finished building his battle armor. Then, he put on the leather and asked Dr. Ensign to help install the battle armor part by part. It went well at first, but soon the terrorists realized that the two were not visible on the monitor. They were hiding behind wooden boards, and immediately sent people to investigate. Looking at the nervous Ensign, Tony smiled. "Don't worry, there's no problem, just start the power system now." Ensign asked. "How to start?" "Press F11 first." Ensign operated the computer as Tony said, and a progress bar appeared soon. He breathed a sigh of relief and turned back to help Tony screw the screws. At this moment, the door was knocked open, and the bombs tied to it exploded. The gang was killed on the spot. "It's too late." Ensign glanced at the door, put down the wrench, and said to Tony, "Tony, I'll go out and delay them to get some time for you." "No need, we have time, and we will go according to plan." Tony hurriedly shouted, but Ensign didn't listen. He picked up the gun dropped by the terrorists on the ground and went out. He didn't know how to shoot, so he shot randomly with the gun. Fortunately, the terrain was narrow, and the terrorists were frightened and fled back. "Ensign!" Tony shouted anxiously, regretting for the first time in his heart. He knew that when someone came to save him but he refused, then Ensign died, he would feel guilty for the rest of his life. Will Ensign die? Under normal circumstances, of course not long after he ran out of bullets, he was shot by the terrorists. Ensign fell to the ground, but there was no fear, only relief because his family had been killed by the terrorists long ago. Just as Ensign's eyes gradually sank into darkness, a voice sounded in his mind. "Do you want to know the meaning of life?" I'm sorry, I've messed up the words. A good person like you doesn't deserve to die like this." Ensign fainted before he could hear it. No one knew that the bullets that shot him were all stuck in his muscles. Bert, who was on the helicopter, smiled slightly. He transferred some of his blood to Ensign early in the morning. Such a good person should not be damned. The terrorists killed Ensign and immediately rushed in to find Tony. Just at this moment, the lights suddenly dimmed, as the electricity was used to start the Mark I. Next, it was Tony's time. He was so angry that he drove the rough and rudimentary Mark I and killed everyone. The terrorists couldn't stop him at all. "Ensign!" Tony looked at Ensign, who was covered in blood on the ground. He was angry and guilty. He roared and rushed out of the cave. Countless bullets greeted him, and his armor clacked. Tony was not afraid, because these bullets could not penetrate his armor at all, and all were bounced away. He raised his arms, the flamethrower was activated, and the flames were blazing from both hands. The terrorists were burned in an instant, crying and screaming, and their leader Raza was in a hurry. It doesn't matter if the terrorists die, anyway, they can be recruited at any time, but their weapons are all piled outside. By the way, these arms are all produced by the Stark Group. Seeing that the guns couldn't kill Tony, Raza gritted his teeth, took out a bottle of red potion from his pocket, and drank it with his head up. Soon, Raza's muscles immediately swelled up a bit. Feeling full of strength, he pulled out his machete, rushed to the front of Mark I from the side, and cut it off with a single knife. The gas pipe on the right side of Mark I was directly cut off. What? Tony was a little surprised, and hurriedly aimed the flame on the left at Raza, but Raza flexibly circled from behind Tony to the left. Another slash, and all of Tony's flame jets were finished. At this time, Tony didn't have any combat training, and the silly control armor slammed into Raza, and Raza escaped easily. Then, Raza stabbed the scimitar into the gap of Tony's left leg connector and clicked. With a bang, Tony got down on one knee. The Mark I is too rudimentary, and there is no armor protection at the connection position, so it is easy for Raza to succeed. Seeing that Raza succeeded, the terrorists cheered one after another. Raza was furious. He picked up the machete on the ground and stabbed it in the gap in Tony's armor. Tony hurriedly fought back, but the cumbersome armor is not that flexible. He was cut several times in succession, but fortunately, he was protected by leather, so he didn't suffer any serious injuries. Damn, the material is too poor! Seeing that the situation is not good, Tony intends to detonate the arsenal and run away. Mark I can fly. At this moment, a helicopter suddenly flew out from the back of the mountain. Then, a figure jumped from the sky and knelt on one knee. It landed on the ground with a bang, kicking up a puff of dust. The perfect superhero landing is a bit of a knee-breaker. This marks the end of part 12 of the story, Blade God of Blood. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.